into it now. We're on the eighth studio album of the Foo Fighters, which is Sonic Highways. Exciting days. Nothing like I've ever seen before in an album. Kurt, run it down for us.
Oh yeah. This is probably one of the most creative ideas I've seen, at least recording an album. What they did, rather than go to, one studio album or one studio to record the album, they decide to go to 8 different cities and record one song at each studio, make that into one album. Pretty exciting stuff.
It
And
it
yeah,
it really is. I mean, even the you look at the artwork for the album itself, and it has the eight or the infinity sign. I read it stands for both as the eighth record, and then it has the skyscraper in Seattle. You have the Hollywood sign. You have buildings from all the cities. The Washington Monument right there. Shout outs to all the buildings from all the cities that they visited over the course of who knows how long this took. It's probably a huge production. It was announced 2013 at some point, and then was released towards the end of 2014. So they probably worked quite a bit on this. You know, getting to eight
indeed.
cities and doing eight individual documentaries.
Yeah, and I love just Dave talking about it before, really getting into each song. He says after 20 years, he looked for ways to change the process and make it more of a challenge. In regards to recording previous albums, he says a day here, a day there. We never really got a chance to get a feel for the places we are in or what they have to offer. So for our 20th anniversary, we decided to do something to make the creative process new again. He goes into it more too, just how the environment like ultimately influences the end result. Not just the studio, but the people and the history. Um, Wanted people to feel more connected to it. So very, very exciting. Talking to musicians in the area, producers, studio owners, and find out what inspires them. So pretty exciting.
When I first started watching, like I was totally different than I expected. I thought they were going to go through the process of writing the song in a city, and it wasn't anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, and it was fascinating to watch. And we've got to be careful here today, for sure, because there's like a hour long episode for each one of these songs, and we could go so much depth into the people behind it, who he talked to, all this stuff. There's just
Yeah,
so much with this album, and that's one of the things I love about it is the songs are good, but you get the story behind the songs, you get the story behind the lyrics, and each song has, like Dave said, there's a, you know, it, we talking about the album. He said there's it's definitely, when you listen to it, it's a Foo Fighters album, but there's something so much deeper that goes on with the meaning. So they wrote the songs. I think they wrote the songs beforehand, but I think they wrote the lyrics on the road, from what I understand, and kind of the lyrics impact the city impacted each of the lyrics.
yeah, yeah. I remember hearing, the songs like, pretty much when they came out, and then watching interviews and everything
Yeah,
later on, and hearing the songs. You hear the lyrics, you memorize them, and watching the interviews, I'm like, oh, that's in the song. So it's fun
yeah.
to catch those moments. Fun that he wanted to really incorporate that the specific city into the song, make it their song.
I love how he said he wanted to go for something more challenging. He's like, this whole record stuff is too easy now. You know,
Right, yeah, yeah.
Christopher Walken. I wake up and I make gold records.
Love it.
So yeah, he
But
wants a challenge. He wants to shake it up, and I can appreciate the fact that he wants to shake it up. And for a guy like Dave, who's just grew up in the kind of scenes they talk about in some of these shows and this punk rock scene, he they go back and they kind of relive all these people's past and these childhoods, and how these cities became what they are, and how these cities became, or how the musicality around these cities became what it is. And it's really fascinating that um how much music has shaped these cities and how much the
Oh,
music
for
scene has
sure.
shaped what goes on in these cities. It's incredible to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I mean, like the structure of our podcast, for those that have listened, excuse me, we typically take that first half, talk about the history of the album, what's going on with the band, and then we just go into the songs. We figure, well, this one might be a little different, seeming that the album was made differently as well. We were talking about the history briefly, but we'll try to dive into for each song, dive into the history as well, the background, the scene, some of the artists that have come from that scene. So, uh, yeah, we'll see how this one goes. We aren't sure how long it'll take, but we'll try to condense and give you some of the highlights of
Absolutely. We don't want
what
to,
we learned.
there's this could be a whole mini series podcast by itself. You know what I mean? Just talking
Right.
about analyzing everything, but that's what the episodes are. There's no need, but it's, yeah, we'll just try to keep it short because there's some really cool things that you want to point out, real cool things that influence some people that played on these songs because they got guest musicians for each one of the songs. And I think my favorite, well, we'll talk about that in a second. It's
Yeah.
incredible. So let's just dive into the songs then. The first one, did you
Track
want
one, we've got.
did you have a guest to announce the cities, or was he going to do that later?
Oh yeah, we'll get into that later. I think
Okay, cool, cool, cool.
we've got a few guest podcasters that'll be joining us. So
Of course. Well, then
yeah,
I'll say it. Then they were in Chicago first. We're starting off in Chicago, going big. The song is "Something from Nothing," and it was recorded at Electrical Audio.
yes. And since they're in Chicago, they brought in Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick,
I
the
love
lead
it.
guitarist.
I
Yeah.
love it.
It was interesting learning about Electrical Audio Studio. Um, I don't know how many of you have heard of Steve Albini, one of the world's greatest producers, recording engineers, actually recently passed away just last month. So very sad to hear that. Um, One thing that I really found interesting about Steve, I mean, not just hearing what a great producer he was, he never took a royalty. I guess, I'm not too familiar with how the record or the music industry works, but apparently producers, they make royalties when you use them, record off of them, and that just kind of boggles my mind that they do that. But I
He
love
compared
that.
it to a plumber. I love that. He's like,
Yeah,
if a plumber comes and fixes your house 20 years from now, are you going to be like, hey man, I probably deserve some more money. Your house is still standing up. And
right. Yeah,
there's probably a hot topic in the industry because there's the artists are getting royalties every time people play their songs. So again, I'm not in that field, so I can't really talk to it. But it just makes it seem like, um, from an outsider's perspective, he's all about the music. He's doing a job. He
yeah,
wants the music. He's like, I'm not here to, you know, whatever it is, claim fame or get rich. I'm here to produce music. I'm here to release awesome songs.
for sure. I loved hearing just all the artists. And, when we talk about the musicians for each city, it may not be this artist is born and raised. Some of them are, but it's either, they have lived in this city, maybe they recorded in this city, or somehow was a part of this city. But, hearing names for Chicago, we've got Etta James, Chicago, surprise, Naked Ray Gun, Wilco, Gene Krupa, Kanye, um, Ministry, Muddy Waters, which I heard some say it was like our Beatles. So that was fun.
Oh, the
Uh,
Muddy Waters, the Chicago's Beatles.
yeah, yeah.
That's so funny because they talk about, oh, was the Ramones in the California or the New York episode? Because they said the same thing. The
Oh,
Ramones are our Beatles.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I think
Anyway,
LA. Well, yeah,
I'm getting
that'll.
way ahead of myself. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
Keep going.
yeah. Bonnie Raitt and Buddy Guy, just
Buddy
to name,
Guy, man, Buddy
yeah,
Guy.
just to name a few.
So he sat down, like it's just incredible the people he was able to get on this documentary. But Buddy Guy is such a fascinating story. Just real quick, he
Yeah.
he uh he didn't have any musical instruments, so he would tie like rubber bands or strings onto like nails and whatever he could to make sound. And oh my gosh, what an influential, what a genius musician.
Yeah. Well, and that was something that is in the lyrics for Something from Nothing. You hear Dave say a button on a string. Um,
Yep.
Something else Buddy Guy said, going to Chicago, because he was actually Louisiana raised, but he said going to Chicago, it's like I was looking for a dime and found a quarter.
Yeah,
And that
because he
was,
said that in the interview.
yeah,
Yep.
something, another quote or another, yeah, from another interview Dave put into the lyrics for this song.
Yeah, so something from nothing like that. What a shout out to all these musicians who came from nothing and became massively successful, and not just successful in music, but we're talking about the pioneers of some of these genres of music, and people that really changed the way that people see music and the way that people hear music and the way that people enjoy music as well. It's kind of crazy to think about, and Dave really hits a lot of those sweet spots on the people who were super influential. And not we're not talking about influential in the past 10, 20 years. We're talking about past, 25, 30, 35 years.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I love something Dave said in it. One thing I've realized with all these people is that we've all made something from nothing. It's that fire or that inspiration that moves you through life. Um, I love Chris. Oh, one other thing. Dave talks with his friend Tracy, and if you've been listening to the previous podcasts, she was that friend when Dave was young that introduced him to punk rock.
Oh, his cousin.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
I remember, like, I love the face on it. Like, she walked down the stairs and they said they went in this nice house, curved staircase, marble floors, and then down walks my cousin, just, describes the typical punker. And he was like, and she said, I remember that day, and your face, like, right when you saw me, you were like, jaw
yeah.
dropped, wide open, gaping mouth. And it was,
What's going
and
on?
it was one of the first shows he went to. They went out that night, and she took him to some shows, and it's really kind of his first experience in music.
Yeah,
Or not first experience in music, not even close, but like first experience in that kind of setting
in the punk scene.
in the punk scene. Sorry, yeah, to clarify.
Yeah, yeah. I love also, well, just the fact that they have um, what's his name, Rick from Cheap Trick. Chris, Chris is mentioning when I first joined the Foo Fighters, we played Chicago on Halloween and dressed up as Cheap Trick.
Yep, I remember that. That's awesome.
Very cool there.
And
But
now kind of come full circle having Rick Nielsen, and what a performer Rick Nielsen is.
yeah, yeah.
That
I
that
do.
hat that hat is great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember watching the music video for the first time, and like when Rick does start playing too, just looking at them, I was like, okay, Foo Fighters, they've got, 13 guitarists now. I mean, they already had Chris and Pat and Dave playing, but
They even
yeah,
said that they were like, "Yeah, we don't have enough guitarists, so
yeah, yeah. Um, one thing, well, this song sticks out to me the most because we were living in down in San Diego at the time, and I got to give a shout out to 91X, one of the best radio stations there is. 91.1. If you're down in San Diego, check it out. Or just check them out online. But like when this came out, they played that song like all the time, and like I just loved it. Like, I love it almost has, like, stages of, like, the intensity of the song. Like, the first minute and a half, it's, like, really just calm and, nothing crazy. Then at that minute and a half, it like picks up a little bit. About 2:35, it gets really just really going, and then at the 3-minute mark, it just gets like heavy. It's just like,
It gets as hard as any Foo Fighters song does, you know?
yeah. No, it reminds me of in School of Rock when they're talking about musical influences. Jack Black's he's like, I'm talking about bands that rock, and he's like shaking his fists all hard, and it's like this part of the song that reminds me of that.
Nice. That's awesome.
But yeah, it's really good. And at that 4-minute mark, you got Chris coming back in and tickling his guitar, just playing that solo, and it's yeah, one of their songs that just rocks. But
Yeah, it's a good one. I really enjoy
yeah.
it. It's my favorite song on the album,
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, which is funny that it's the intro song too, but it's a great song.
Yeah.
All right, we can go to other stuff, but I don't want to go too deep into a bunch of stuff. But just I just love that they outlined this upcoming punk scene that was going on, and you know how influential that was to so many different people.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And it's incredible how young these kids were when they were doing this stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just
These
teenagers.
yeah, they were kids, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's like little kids running around. All right, song one, Something from Nothing. Again, Electric Audio Studios in Chicago, Illinois. Moving on, The Feast and Famine. Sorry, The Feast and the Famine is song two.
Feast and the Famine.
And Dave goes home for this one. He goes to Arlington County, Virginia, to Inner Ear Studios, which is a little more than just home for him.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and we get some guest appearances from Peter Stahl and Skeeter Thompson. You may recognize those names from Dave's first, at least, big band that he joined, Scream.
Yes.
But yeah, this Inner Ear Studio, the studio of Dave's childhood music. Um, the owner, Don Zientara. Hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. But, this is the name on all punk CDs out of DC.
Yeah.
And I love how they, you know, the the studio creating these punk albums, and they talk about Don, how he's like a 6'6", nerdy sounding
Yeah, it's like,
surfer.
hey
It's
guys, how you
like,
doing? Like,
yeah.
not what you would expect. And he says that himself. Like, he's like, not what people would expect when they're trying to meet, you know, some guy who's producing all this punk music.
Hmm. But yeah, they talk about a lot of bands in the DC scene. We've got Bad Brains, Scream, of course, Pharrell Williams, Starland Vocal Band, Marvin Gaye, Duke Ellington, Henry Rollins, Fugazi, all sorts of like a good variety, not just the punk scene that, Dave talks about, but all sorts of different artists. I do.
Man, bad brains, dude. What
Bad
a
Brains.
what I you know, you gotta look at that guy and what a revolutionary he was in so many different ways. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like with the music he did, and he wanted to go faster, he wanted to go harder, and it was oh man, I appreciate that guy. He's awesome.
Oh, for sure. I did like what Dave said on the punk scene, or at least yeah, just on punk. Says I don't think the punk scene started as a music scene. Like it started as a group of misfits. So interesting that it talks about like starting with the people and then like the music came second.
Yeah,
I,
that's a good way. I like that he describes it that way.
mm-hmm. Also, just like going along with the punk scene of DC, and with Inner Ear Studios, just all those bands. Uh, he says these bands might not be the most famous bands in the world, but these bands influenced some of the most famous bands in the world. He talks about how these bands really or at least from what he says, influenced Red Hot Chili Peppers,
Hmm.
Beastie Boys, Jane's Addiction, Green Day. Just how these bands from DC
And
played
I
a
really
big role.
appreciate that about this is that, sorry, I cut you off, but yeah, I really
Oh no,
appreciate
it's good.
that about he didn't go for the biggest bands. He wanted to trace back, like, maybe not 50, 60 years back, but at least, 30 years, like, okay, where did this start from? Where's a good starting point, or at least a good turning point in the music industry, the music scene in this city that influences kind of how it is today or what it is today. And so he didn't go for the bands that everyone would recognize, but he went for the bands that changed the scenes or influenced everybody or I appreciate that about this
Yeah,
about when he went out to find the people he did.
yeah, that's a good point. I like that too. Bands that really have their feet or just planted in that city somehow,
Yeah.
bringing that influence. Um, yeah, when Dave says, I like when he says, whenever I felt lost, I'd go back to Virginia. Just pulled everything back into perspective. Um, I do also love he like stops by his mom's house and they just have like a
Of course, that's
yeah.
Dave though. Like he has to. I
Oh,
love that he
for
has a
sure.
great relationship with his mom.
Yeah. This doesn't involve the music at all, but I like how they're looking through photo albums.
Yeah,
He
right.
says, I couldn't just take a nice picture, you know? Like he's like one of the pictures they're looking at, he's just making a silly face. And I think it's just in every boy's nature to do that. Like
Yep.
a bunch of pictures of my childhood, we see that a little bit, and happy to report Andrew's in that phase as well. So
Yep.
good times.
It's funny.
But yeah, this is great. This is a great song too. I think I agree. Like something from nothing, especially just because like that was one that I heard on the radio so much when
And
this album
it
came
was
out.
it's one of those ones that even non Foo Fighters fans would probably maybe recognize.
Yeah.
A lot of these songs weren't as I feel weren't as commercially successful as some of their other albums. Maybe that's
Yeah.
just based on how it was released or when it was released. Who knows why. But I think something from nothing is more recognizable. But Feast and the Famine is as much of a Foo Fighter song as any.
Yeah. And I think this one might be like a close second for me.
Yeah.
Great song.
Great
Um,
song. Man, I didn't know there was such a huge DC scene either. Like I
yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
and what a great thing because I know we don't want to go too probably too deep into this, but I love that he outlines because a lot of punk was political. And I love how he outlines
Yeah.
when it became political and how in DC because it was DC, how they, revolutionized stuff or how they became revolutionaries is what I meant to say. Um, and that also like because you get a band like we talked about Green Day a few podcasts ago and how they're political and this guy's influenced Green Day. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so the I don't know, man. The way that the DC scene is pictured it's more than just revolutionizing music in the DC area. It's revolutionizing punk in general and making it, hey, we're not just out here to make noise. We're standing for something. We're doing stuff with our music as well.
Hmm. Yeah, they one of the bands they talk about in there is Minor Threat.
Yes.
And when they start, talking going into punk, most punk influenced by English punk. It's more like political and class struggle.
Mhm.
Didn't apply to American life, they were saying. But with like Minor Threat, it was more sociological issues that really
Yep.
did matter to us, more personable and relatable. Uh, and I didn't realize Ian McKay. I didn't
Hmm.
realize or they just like go on with him. Like one of the most honorable things about him is his evolution as a musician. He was the bass player of Teen Idols. He was
Oh yeah, yeah.
the singer of Minor Threat, and then he was
The guitarist.
Fugazi. I didn't know there was that connection with Minor Threat and Fugazi, so that was fun
Yeah.
to hear. But yeah, fun hearing about, just the punk scene, and it was about those sociological issues, more personable, more relatable. And another thing that was mentioned, one of the ways to draw the community together was to have shows, as a positive force, encourage the people to do something with their lives. I think a lot of, music, it's just like, oh, they're just making all this loud noise. It's like, no, it's,
Especially with punk music back in the day. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it's just noise and screaming. Like
yeah. But
all
yeah,
right. Well, that's Washington
fantastic song.
D.C.
Yeah.
That how you were? Did you have another point you were gonna say?
No, no, that was pretty much it.
All right. I really appreciate the song three guest. I don't know his music very well, but anyway, the third
Yeah.
song is Congregation, which is perfect because it's based in Nashville, Tennessee, the
Tennessee.
homeland or whatever you want to call it of country music, and it takes place at Southern Ground Studios.
Indeed.
Um, and the guest on this one is Zach Brown, and I love. I got to be honest. I didn't know much. I know the name Zach Brown, and I know he's a country singer, but I didn't know much about him. But oh man, I have a new appreciation for this guy after this. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've heard the name. Like I know who, yeah, if I heard the name, it's like, oh yeah, I've heard of him. But yeah, just not familiar with his music. I do like how Dave just talks about him. Where is it? What does he say? Something cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, yeah, they're both kind of like outcasts or
Yeah,
outliers or whatever it was, whatever the word he used was.
yeah, he's not quite your typical country. Maybe, I don't know, maybe if any of our listeners listen to country, you could fill us in more. But I love how Dave says he rips on guitar.
Yeah,
He
and
says
he does, man. They showed that
yeah,
one scene of him. It was incredible.
yeah. Well, and he says he could be in Slayer. He could be in
Yes.
the fastest death metal band in the world.
Yep.
And yeah, he plays well. I It's interesting though, because when Zach talks about starting out playing guitar, he actually started taking classical guitar when he was 7. Later
Sorry,
on,
School of Rock. I used to play classical, but now I play rock.
yeah, yeah, indeed.
Sorry.
Uh, we're throwing all the School of Rock
Oh
references
yeah.
in this one. And then he like goes to a camp, and like one of the kids there, he's like playing just typical guitar, and Zach, he goes in, he's like, "What is that?" And the kid's like, "It's a chord." And he's like,
What's a
how?
chord?
Yeah, how many chords are there?
Oh yeah, that was it. How many chords are
Yeah.
there?
It does. I don't think this was mentioned in any of the interviews, but it did remind me of Dave. I mean, just the fact that like Dave, he never had like, legit lessons how to play
Yeah.
the drums. And I mean, he played on his pillows in his house. It's just like a very humble upbringing, and just kind of, you know, learned on your own and followed your heart.
Yep.
So very cool.
I like the story of how they met and they were like, we need to work together at some point. And then Dave goes to Nashville and it's the night of the CMAs, Country Music Awards. Um, and he go Zach was like, I think we can get Dave Grohl to play drums for us at the CMAs. so
Yeah.
Dave Grohl, being Dave Grohl, goes to the CMAs and plays drums for Zach Brown.
Yeah.
Which, how do you feel if you're Zach Brown's drummer? Like, oh, I'm getting displaced, but at the same time, you got to appreciate the fact that it's Dave Grohl displacing you.
Right. Yeah. If anyone is going to replace me, it's like I'd be fine with Dave Grohl.
Right. And so maybe I didn't understand this correctly because it seemed kind of weird, but Zach Brown actually brought Dave Grohl on to produce his album.
Yeah, I think that was the initial, like, hey, let's get Dave to produce.
What did he actually produce the album? I didn't even look. I should have looked it up, but I didn't. Did he
Ooh,
actually produce the album? Let me look it up.
okay. Yeah,
Zach
I can't
Brown.
remember. Um, Before Dave actually came out and played though, I there was one story I loved hearing. Let's see. Oh yeah. So Dave flew to Nashville and he said he'd never heard a Zach Brown song before. And
Hmm.
it's funny because like if I'm in Dave's spot, I would think he would like at least like, hey, I'm on the plane. I've got time to kill. Maybe I'll just like open up, Apple Music or Spotify or something. Just check out like a sample. But I love that he gets to the studio and to their faces, he's like, you know,
I know
before
they showed
coming,
it in the video. I've never
yeah,
heard you guys' music.
and not just like I haven't heard it. He's like, I never, ever, ever heard your music, not once.
A great way to
Never
say,
heard,
hey, I've never heard you guys, but I'm going to produce your next album.
yeah. And he goes on, I've never heard one of your songs ever. Like, he's emphasizing so
The
much.
dramaticism of the ever.
Yeah, ever. I think I counted three evers and a never and a not once. And it's like you don't have to like, you keep saying that. You can you can just say like, oh, I'm not too familiar with all your albums. But anyway, I thought that was pretty funny.
So all I can find here is that it's called the Grohl Sessions Volume One.
Okay,
Yeah, so he was the producer.
got
It's
it.
crazy.
Yeah. One thing
But
I
what a
forgot
great intro. Like, hey guys, what's going on? Never, 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 not once have I listened to you, but
ever.
I'm here to tell you what to do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I forgot to mention after we talked about the studio. Well, first off, that it was an old church built in 1901, Southern Ground Studios. But yeah, some of the artists, it, you just got to think of country. You hear of Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton was a big one. She was in the movie a lot too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Willie Nelson, Carrie Underwood, Dan of the Black Keys, Steve
Yes.
Earle, Emmylou Harris, Johnny Cash,
Johnny
Kenny
Cash.
Rogers. Um, let's see, Lady Antebellum, Roger Miller, Tammy Wynette, Brad Paisley, Taylor Swift. Not born, but pursued music in
I
Nashville.
love that T Swizzle was in there too. That man. And
Yeah.
Taylor Swift is everywhere, even in
Yep.
the Foo Fighters
Yeah.
um,
I don't know if
documentary. Sorry.
yeah. It's funny, it mentioned Willie Nelson. It was funny when Dolly was talking about uh Willie Nelson. I guess like back in the day, Willie Nelson was very like clean cut, not the long hair. But as Dolly's talking, she's like, "Yeah, Willie, he used to have no hair, no beard. He was kind of dorky looking. Looked great."
Ah!
Uh, I love that's kind of like the Southern way. You can, say something bad about them, but just be sure to say something nice
I
afterwards.
love it.
Like
Yeah.
he looked great. It's kind of like her bless his heart. You often hear that in the South too.
I it's interesting to me, and if you're going to go around to all the cities in the United States with music histories, you got to go to Nashville. But what a
Oh yeah.
departure from everything Foo Fighters to go to a country, the country capital of the United States,
Yeah.
which you have to though. How do you make a music documentary without even mentioning Nashville? I mean, look at the influence that they've had, and yeah, it's country music, but there's things outside of country music that Nashville is responsible for. So
Yeah. Well, during some of the interviews, they're saying, it's the Hollywood of music.
yeah, yeah, and it was interesting to see um, the interaction with all these people and the Foo Fighters and or Dave who was doing all the interviews. The people that he probably wouldn't usually hang around with or associate with, not associate with, but make music with. But there's still that desire to find the point of shift or the changing point or what made Nashville great or how the music influenced everything else. You're still looking for that inside of music that's so far outside your spectrum of what you're used to.
Hmm. A lot of the band members, they had great things to say about it too. Like
Yeah.
Nate, he talks about how his dad liked country.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's right.
yeah, Chris mentions like this visit has been the most fun. He's, talking about the environment, the studio, and of course the food.
Yeah, yes, I remember them mentioning the food.
Hmm. I liked hearing Dave talk about the music as well. He says the foundation of a lot of this music comes from the church. He
Hmm.
says it's nice to know that there's music that has a foundation that isn't rooted in misery,
I
because
wrote
that's
that down. I wrote
yeah.
that down too, dude.
And then he says, because that's where mine comes from.
Because yep, rooted in misery. I have that.
Yeah.
Because that's where mine comes from. That's great. And yeah, I mean, you can see that in country music for sure. Like they mentioned a lot about how country music tells a story, and so naming the song "Congregation" is kind of it's a little poetic, and congregation is a group of religious people to meet together, and to have this foundation of religious music or gospel music, and then the people coming together in Nashville. I think "Congregation" is a very fitting title for a song like that.
Yeah, for sure. There is one other Zach Brown story that I did love. I think worth mentioning. I guess they wrote a song called Chicken Fry,
Why,
and
when you
then,
said another Jack Brown story, I was like, I know exactly what one he's gonna tell.
oh yeah, I guess another band, Lost Trailers, wanted to record it, and Zach said, this is our song, have it on the album, but not the radio. He was fine with that. I guess they got a record deal through Sony with Joe Galani, pretty much runs Nashville. Zach hears it on the radio, but it wasn't him singing it. So he called his lawyer because this isn't what they signed up for. They said they
Yeah.
wouldn't do it. His lawyer said, this could be bad for you fighting back. I guess this Joe guy was like, he's the big guy. So, and Zach was
They
just
said he'd
like,
get like blacklisted in Nashville if he did that.
yeah, exactly. And eventually he's just like, forget it. So he sent the cease and desist and they pulled it from the radio. And then I think the best part was there was a show he was playing. Um Played a show in Nashville. Was it Keith Segal? Yeah, Keith came out to hear Zach play and he, talks to Zach. He's like, I gotta meet the kid that told Joe Galani to, quote, take off pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. Take off in a more vulgar way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Zach said like that was the beginning. So
Yeah. I mean, and that's so great. Like when you care more about your music and that kind of stuff than not having to worry about these big wig executives like turning on you like, hey, that we had a deal, blah blah blah. I'm standing up for myself here because it's my song. I wrote that. It's.
yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot. All right.
It's one other thing. It the song as a whole may not be my favorite, but like towards the end, I think it's at like 3 minutes, 15 seconds. It's like the part where Zach comes in, he starts playing guitar. That like next minute, it's like one of my favorite parts of the album. Not just Zach
It's awesome.
playing, but yeah, just the direction the song goes. So
Yeah.
even if you don't check out the whole album, even if you don't check out this whole song, because I mean it's pretty good. It's not my favorite
Listen to the
necessarily.
Zach Brown part at least.
Yeah, fantastic part. So,
All right, next one. What did I do? God is my witness.
hmm.
Austin, Texas,
Austin.
featuring the one and only Gary Clark Jr. Studio
Hmm.
6A.
where the Studio 6A, part of Austin City Limits, which was started in 1976, where they're I mean, I'm not too familiar with it, but it's a big thing, especially out in Austin, where it's a show where they have interviews and live performances and produced by Austin PBS. And yeah, Austin became widely known in the US as the live music capital of the world.
Yep.
Pretty fun learning about that.
It's interesting. Not the capital of music, but the capital of live music, which is kind of, yeah, you probably get some people from New Orleans to disagree with you on that.
Indeed. I'm sure all cities will
Yeah, yeah,
want to
they
throw
all
their
have their
hat into
titles.
the ring. I love at the beginning of this one, Dave starts playing Stairway to Heaven and he's like, I've got a song idea. It's kind of long and Chris starts playing Smoke on the Water and Pat with Bohemian Rhapsody and then Dave, once again comes around and starts playing Smells Like Teen Spirit. But in, fun little intro.
Yeah, yeah, I like that a lot.
But yeah, we see lots of bands here as well. They talk about the Flatlanders, Steve Earle, the Pixies, Sonic Youth, Neil Young, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Of course, like you mentioned, Gary Clark Jr. But I love just how they describe Austin as a quote unquote big small town.
Oh yeah, I remember they said that it's got the feel of a small town, but it's a big town.
Yeah. And just kind of going along the lines of live music capital of the world. You got reggae, rock, blues, jazz, country, and they all, playing next door to each other.
Right? I love that. Just a melting pot of music.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Because in the
mentioned,
other cities so far, it's been kind of consistent of what kind of music they've had there, or just a couple kinds. Austin's kind of the first one they went into that's like, dude, everything's happening here, not just this or that.
right. And apparently, I mean, we talked about Willie Nelson in the Nashville part, but I guess he was from Texas.
Hmm.
He went to Nashville, but then back to Texas. And they said, like, Austin, it was already a music town. Excuse me. But things converged when Willie came to town. Um, I like how they said, like, rednecks and hippies would be in the same room. Like, music united them
Yeah, that's awesome. Music doesn't unite people. That's incredible.
for sure.
Rednecks and hippies.
Indeed.
I love that. Yeah,
Blue. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say the song itself is interesting as well. It's again, not my favorite song on the album, but it does have a nice, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe this song in a couple words, but it's an enjoyable listen for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that Gary Clark Jr.'s on it.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, I love how, you know, kind of how you mentioned, not just getting necessarily like the biggest or whatever, even though Gary Clark Jr.'s big, but I like that they got him because, he's born and raised in Austin. Um,
They got a true blooded Austin for sure. Austinite
exactly.
or whatever they call him down there. Austinite.
Yeah. um, Something else fun to learn about, like he doesn't read music, it's either by sight or ear, just kind
Yeah.
of reminds me of, that same format of like how Dave learned and Zach, is just like learning in their own ways, not the typical or conventional way.
I really I mean, look, I probably am completely off base or wrong on this, but it's always interesting when you get a guy who's self-taught or a girl who's self-taught in music or any form of art for that matter. It really makes you appreciate their art more, because a lot of people are taught how to play guitar, they're taught how to paint, they're taught how to act, they're taught, whatever the art form is, sing. When you get a guy like Gary Clark Jr. who listens to stuff, that's a real musician right there. And not that other people aren't real musicians, but he took it from nothing, and you know the fact that he is self-taught just makes you appreciate his art so much more, because while he has his influences, him being self-taught is in and of itself is like, it's a lot less, it's more him, it's his art form, it's his stuff.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had on that song.
That's it for that one.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. Yeah, I don't know if it's because in California, but this might have been my favorite episode.
Nice.
We're in Rancho de la Luna, iconic. Just a run. It's not a studio. It's a rundown house.
Yeah.
It's an old rundown house in Joshua Tree, Rancho de la Luna, California. Song's called Outside. It features Joe Walsh. If you don't know who Joe Walsh is, then you probably have never listened to music before. No, I'm just kidding. He's from the Eagles, the band the Eagles, or Eagles.
Yes.
And then Chris Gross as well, who is, I think he's probably more well known as a producer than an actual artist. I mean, he played a lot of music, but he produced one of my personal favorites, and something we've brought up on the podcast several times, the Queens of the Stone Age.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love the well, it's been interesting because I mean those that are in Southern California, um, you know, Joshua Tree, it's Palm Springs area or Joshua Tree and there's Palm Springs, but overall like it listed um for this song LA and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
those in Southern California, and it's like there's like the different sections. So it was fun hearing that it was not in LA the city, but just outside
It's
of
so funny.
it.
The
And
whole first part of the documentary, you're like, it's just bouncing back and forth between the desert and LA. It was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
it was kind of trying to say, like, look, we're talking about LA, but we're in the desert. But we're talking about LA, but we're in the desert.
right, yeah. It's been fun like seeing some of the footage. My sister Kristen, she's living out there right now, and
Oh,
what up,
nice.
what up, Kristen? You get your shout out too. But yeah, it's like you mentioned, not really quite a studio out there. I love how they described it. It's weird and wonderful, but functional, filled with vintage and new idiosyncratic recording gear and raw desert vibe, curated by studio operator and guitarist Dave Catching. But yeah, some of the bands that they mention in this, Guns N' Roses, The Doors, Joan Jett,
Joe
Motley
Jett was in this
Crue,
episode a lot, yeah.
yeah, NWA, Beck, Queens of the Stone Age, specifically from Palm Springs, Arctic Monkeys. Let's see, recorded at the studio, Fu Manchu, Iggy Pop, Josh Freese, current drummer of the Foo Fighters. And I thought you might like this, Kyle. Sparta, when At the Drive-In split, they split into
Oh,
Sparta
yeah, that's
and Mars
right.
Volta. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. They have Josh Homme in this episode a lot. And
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep talking about Queens of the Stone Age. I don't care what
Why
band we're
why
talking
not?
about. I'm gonna
Yeah.
bring up Queens of the Stone Age. No, but I love Josh Homme in this episode, and says a lot of things, and he says everything that you're not supposed to do in a studio. Like, you walk into this recording area that people want to record in, and it's really like, you see the room that they recorded in, and it was tiny. They barely fit everyone in there. And he said
Yes.
everything that they tell you to not do is here, is what it is. And it's kind of just what a great area. It's like just kind of this area that everyone wants to go to because of the history. It's makes you feel a part of the art that has happened out there. You don't you're not going to record music, you're going to be a part of something. Yeah, you're going to record music, of course, but you're going out there to be a part of something, be part of the history of Rancho de la Luna, not go to some fancy studio that actually records music.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the fact that you mentioned, just a tiny little studio. I love when they were playing. Dave, he's like, put the BO in HBO.
Yeah. And then like they're finished for a second, and then they open the door, and more people come in. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, we don't have enough people in here already. Come on in.
Come in,
This
yeah.
tiny, tiny room. And that was one of the questions in the beginning. He's like, yeah, we walked in and we were like, hey, are the Foo Fighters gonna fit in here?
Right? Butch Vig, producer.
Yep.
I love he says there's something about this place that forces you to relax.
Yeah, that's a
And
cool thought.
yeah, maybe his optimistic view of him saying this place is really small. He's a good salesman. It forces you to relax.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that's funny.
One thing I will say about this, I have never seen Taylor Hawkins like so like excited. Like he was giddy, like watching Joe Walsh play in the studio.
Yeah.
He was like, "This is great." They talk about how like he wasn't there to show off. Like he was there like, how can I make this song better? Like exactly what you would want, like
Yeah,
from him.
a true musician. Like, hey, I'm going to help play on the Foo Fighters album. I'm totally down. Let's make this song better.
Exactly. But pretty fun experience just watching this episode. Great song. I love towards the end, when Joe Walsh does get in there and start playing. Great guitar part.
Oh
Fun to
yeah.
watch.
So I mean that part of the song too is so cool
Yeah.
when he busts in with that solo style guitar.
Yeah.
And of course the outside, the title is I like the title. I like these titles because they're really poetic, you know. And so outside of LA is kind of I'm guessing is the feel there.
Hmm.
But
Good
yeah,
song, eh?
I mean, I don't think you can come to Southern California and Rancho de la Luna is historic by it's world known too. Like they were talking about how these people from Argentina came up and it was like on their profile picture on their social media
Yeah.
pages and he just walks out one morning and waves to him in his underwear. Okay, what's going on? But yeah, it's world famous. But you can't go to Southern California and not mention the LA scene and everything that's happened in Los Angeles. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So I think that's why they didn't title it Joshua Tree, California. They titled it Los Angeles because of you know, and the people who started the studio um, left Los Angeles to get away to kind of like clear their heads, is what one of the guys had said, and kind of get away from the hustle and bustle and go out
Yeah.
to the 130-degree heat in the desert. No, I'm just kidding. It's not that hot.
Yeah.
Only 120.
120. Get it right.
But yeah, good song, good episode, good history there. That's I didn't know much about that place, and it's incredible the names of these guys. You hear albums, you hear songs, you hear stuff, but you don't think about what's going on behind the scenes and the fact that all these guys are like, hey, I want to play at this house in the desert. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Not even a house, a little shack.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
just want to be part of it, be part of
Yeah.
the scene, be part of the history of it. It's awesome.
Hmm.
All right. Anything else to say about that one?
No, I think I'm good. Check it out though. That's all I
Yeah.
got.
All right. Song 6, In the Clear, New Orleans Preservation Hall, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Playing.
And this is what I was going to say earlier. This is my favorite guest performer,
Ah,
the
okay.
Preservation Hall Jazz Band. And I didn't write it down because I swear I was going to remember it. What they call him, tiny trombone or something like that. No, it wasn't that.
Oh, I think you're thinking of the other one, aren't you?
No, it was New Orleans. The little kid who played the trombone.
Yeah, that's oh shoot. I think you're thinking of Feast and the Famine.
Maybe I am. Oops.
Oops.
Either way,
Either way, yeah.
either way. I like the Preservation Hall Jazz Band. It's incredible. It was great to go to Louisiana. You think about Louisiana, the South, and all the things that happened there. The blues movement, the songs, and I love the fact that I've never been to New Orleans, but I love the fact that you can, and I've heard this from a comedian before. You can go there and pay a couple $100 to get a permit and have a parade, and
Nice.
like it's just normal. You used to have your own parade, hire a band to walk around the streets and play music, and it's just normal.
That's great. Yeah, like before the weather, like the hurricanes had always like terrified me, like how they would get that. I'm just like, oh man, that'd be tough to live there. But especially after watching this, just hearing about the history of the city, the culture, the music, I'm like, man, I want to go. It seems like an awesome place. Um, I looking into the Preservation Hall. Interesting, the history of it. Like in the 1950s, art dealer Larry Bornstein from Milwaukee managed what would become Preservation Hall in the French Quarter as an art gallery. To attract customers, he invited local jazz musicians to play for tips. After a time, the music started drawing more attention than the art. Borenstein turned management over to Ken Grayson Mills and Barbara Reed, who turned it into a music venue and named it Preservation Hall. Very cool. It wasn't even like supposed to be about the music, but people were like, "We like this better. Let's just have it be music."
That's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah,
Well,
the preservation hall, people are walking by, you can hear horses, you hear noises outside. Um, Chris saying, you can feel the sweat of generations pouring off the walls. Just like big music place, somewhere like I want to go.
and I love that Dave Grohl's just standing there inside the thing, and he's like, "Hey, I met that guy last night."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When he's singing it, he's talking inside. I met that guy last night, and there's his dad. His dad's with him.
Right.
That's cool. Was that was this episode, right? Where he said sometimes the most frustrating thing about playing with Dave Grohl is you get in this kind of situation is that you have to go find Dave Grohl.
I believe that
They
was.
had to walk.
Yeah.
He was like in a bar across the hallway, across the street, or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
That was awesome. He's like, "Oh, I'll see you guys later. I'll be
Hmm.
back."
Yeah. Great, and like all the other episodes, great list of musicians they talk about in here. Bonnie Raitt, Louis Armstrong, Harry Connick Jr., Little Richard, uh, Juvenile, Dr. John, The Meters, Steve Earle, the Neville brothers, Bo Diddley, Johnny Otis. Um, yeah, anything like a lot of jazz in the area. And I love they said rock and roll is the evolution of jazz. And yeah, I could definitely see that. Those are like two of my favorite genres. Love rock
Yep.
and roll and jazz. Love listening to jazz.
I love the history there and how that one kind of music leads to another, and they're like, "Hey, I like this, but I want to do it this way." You know what I mean? People put their own twist on it, and then music evolves, and people adjust, and people have inspiration and build off the shoulders of those that came before. And if you look at music, those that came before, it's pretty safe to say they came before in New Orleans. That's where a lot of this stuff started, especially with
Yeah.
with blues,
Yeah.
soul, R&B, all that kind of stuff was all Nolans.
Hmm. And they even say like this being a son of a musician is like a badge of honor in New Orleans.
Yeah.
It's just music is so big there and like
Some of
yeah,
these
if you
guys are like third, fourth generation musicians too.
yeah. Oh
You think
yeah,
about
this was
kids in sports and stuff, like, oh, my dad was a ball player, I'm a ball player. It's like in New Orleans, it's like my dad was a you know trumpet player, I'm a trumpet player.
Yeah. Talk about hottest performance, Jazz Fest.
Did he say from a meteorology or what did he say about it? From a yeah, because he was saying it was actually the hottest one, like because it was so dang hot down there.
Oh, sounds familiar. I can't remember.
I
But
don't even know the word he said. From a meteorological standpoint, something like that.
yeah, sorry to throw you off, but you were correct. Trombone Shorty. Is that who
Oh,
you were
cool. Yeah, yeah.
mentioning?
Okay. I was like, dude, I
Yeah.
swear that was New Orleans. We're talking about the jazz festival and Trombone Shorty. That was it. Yeah, that was the guy.
Making
He
you
took
think you're
over the jazz
crazy.
festival.
Yeah. Yeah, they're playing he was playing since he was just a kid. The trombone was taller than him, so
They call him
yeah.
Trombone. Then
Yeah.
when you get a nickname like that when you're young. And I remember they said my favorite story was he was playing notes or something in the audience, and just he would play like one or two notes or something like that, and then all of a sudden some guy grabbed him up and he disappeared into the crowd, and then a few minutes later he was on the stage at the jazz festival playing.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
hmm Yeah, and pretty sad how they did bring up Hurricane Katrina
Yeah,
from
they
back
did.
in 2005. Yeah, I still remember hearing about that, seeing that, and
Devastating, man.
so many people lost everything. But from it, the city united. The storm helped the people from the city like appreciate the music more.
Yeah,
It's, you know, interesting how they just, made that awful situation, tried turning it into something positive, or at
yeah.
least to remember the positive. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're safe to say turning it into something positive. It's not a positive situation at all, but
no,
finding the
yeah.
positive in a horrible, horrible situation. The other horrible thing about it is they talked a lot about segregation and how a lot of this music was halted because it was illegal for whites and blacks to perform together, which is just
Yeah.
crazy. So they were supposed to do the jazz festival that they started had to be like delayed almost 10 years until the laws caught up with what musicians had been doing for years. It's just playing with people to play with people. It wasn't about any of that with the music. And I think it'd be safe to say, especially in New Orleans, um, the music actually probably sped up desegregation
Oh yeah. Yeah.
because of all the musicians that were like, "Hey, we just want to play together. We just want to play music, man. Let's
Yeah.
play our music. We want to have a jazz festival. We want everybody up there who's supposed to be up there, not just some people here this day, some people this day." So it's great to see, just like we talked about with the punk scene in Washington D.C., how they kind of got political and kind of advanced a lot of movements or introduced a lot of movements. Here in New Orleans, you have the advancement of movements through music as well, which is incredible.
Oh, for sure. Music has a lot of power.
It really does, man. It really does. Especially when you get someone who's willing to stay true to who they are and play the music for what they want. Man, it's tough because there's, 8 full-length documentaries, but in one of them they were like, and I want to say this was Seattle. So I'm not getting ahead of myself too much, but he said like, when you'd come in to sit down at the studio, everyone wanted to go to. Maybe this was New York actually. It was it
Okay.
was it was more of a you know, no, this okay, it was California because it was Josh Homme who said it.
Okay.
He said, "You just remember." Sorry, I'm going a long way here. Remember why when you come into play, just remember why you played music, and we're gonna do awesome. Like it was just like remember why you wanted to play
Yeah,
music in the first place.
for
And
sure.
so I think about that with New Orleans and the advancement and what music can do. It's just like people who just stayed true to why they wanted to play music in the first place can enact great change with music.
Yeah. Love it.
All right, two more. Second to last one, Subterranean. in Robert Lang Studios, Seattle, Washington. Now, this was a huge area because
Oh yeah,
Robert Lang Studios has some pretty significant historical um, meaning to Dave Grohl.
definitely. Yeah, it was the last place Nirvana recorded. It's where Dave did the first Foo Fighters album by himself. Um, yeah, I think Dave says, like, where was it? Yeah, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Seattle. Have a lot of great memories and heartbreaking memories. Seattle is like my phantom limb. I still feel it.
Yeah, that was
Um,
interesting when he said that. That's a great comparison, you know.
yeah. Also for this track, we have guest appearance from Ben Gibbard, and for this specific podcast, I had to wear my Death Cab for Cutie shirt.
Nice, nice. I love it.
Big fan of Death Cab and his work in the Postal Service. So
Yep.
yeah, I was pretty excited. I'll be honest, I'm a big fan of Foo Fighters, big fan of Postal Service and Death Cab. This song, maybe I had my expectations too high, but it's a song, yeah.
Yeah, right. For how,
So,
yeah, exactly. Because Postal Service is great. Death
oh,
Cab
I
is
love
great.
them.
Foo Fighters is great. It's like this song is like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whatever.
I I was
So
putting too much pressure on them. They,
probably.
But
That's
yes,
funny.
the music from the scene, a lot of the artists they talk about, you know, well, first off, just grunge in general, the whole grunge scene. They talk about Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Soundgarden, other musicians. You got Ben Gibbard, Nancy Wilson from Heart, Ray Charles, Jimi Hendrix. Let's see who else. The Sonics, um, Nirvana. I already mention that.
Hmm. It's worth
Queensryche.
mentioning twice because
Yeah, yeah,
even the Robert Lang studio said he's like the biggest band I've ever had in here is Nirvana. He said the biggest band I'm ever gonna have in here is Nirvana. Like there's nothing gonna be bigger than that.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Queensryche, Portugal the Man, Peter Frampton, Bush, Presidents of the United States of America, Dave
Yes.
Matthews. So many good ones.
President of the United States. You miss Sir Mix-a-Lot, and I'm offended that you
Oh,
didn't.
yeah.
I was waiting
Yeah.
for you to say Sir Mix-a-Lot, and you didn't, so I had to mention it.
Thank you for
Yes,
coming in
yes,
with
of
that.
course. Also,
But,
Lil Wayne recorded there.
oh yeah.
Should be noted. Anyway,
Yeah. Well, they refer to Seattle as a little town vibe with a big city attitude. They
nice.
talk about a lot about the bad weather, and I've lived in Oregon for I forgot how long it was. It was only like 8 to 10 months, way back in the day. But yeah, we were there for fall and winter, and in Oregon, and it rains a lot. I beautiful, beautiful area, but the weather just gets to you. I love visiting still, but
I like that they said that though. Like a lot for a lot of these kids, it's like a nine. Oh, I won't quote him directly, but he said it like it's just kind of like a piddly rain for 9 months on end, and what else are you gonna do? Like so, we just played music.
yeah, yeah. Just the whole music scene. Let's see. Oh, I forgot who this was. It might have been Ben, but like when you're playing music as a hobby, you take more risks from that attitude. Bands created their own style. Um, Ben also talks about, people had to create their own scene. This was like back before social media, but I mean, it's hard to, or I mean, it's just amazing to see like the whole grunge scene that evolved, from this area. It wasn't like this big nationwide thing. It's like super concentrated just right in here.
Love it. All right, moving on.
Oh,
Last.
one
Oh,
thing, one
sorry.
thing we should
Sorry, I'm getting ahead of
probably,
myself.
yeah, I mean, one thing we should probably bring up, they talked about Kurt Cobain's death.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Sorry to, bring on the bad news, but,
No, no,
definitely,
no. You're right. We should have brought that up because it was a huge event, especially in Seattle.
yeah. I mean, like Ben Gibbard, he talks about remembering hearing about it. He was 17 at the time. He was getting choked up just like talking about it.
Talking about it again. Yeah, yeah. Bringing it up all
Yeah,
those years later.
but
That was it.
like,
It was the one where his mom came in and said, "Hey, you know what?
yeah, it's just like all
Yeah,
sweet, like, hey, sweetie, sorry, but yeah, he remembers it vividly and just like he was shook by it. But
yeah,
and he says, I like, he says the music doesn't have to be important to you to know how important it was to other people.
oh, that's
Just
so
referring
good.
to, yeah.
That's so good. Because you
Um,
look at bands that you don't even, like, I don't like them, but I know how influential they are, you know?
oh yeah, for sure. I think we talked about this in um the self-titled album, their Dave's first album that he made. But after Kurt's death, Dave saying he didn't know what to do, spent a lot of time doing nothing, couldn't even stand the sound of music. He was scared of music, and it was while he was driving in Ireland. It was like talking about the rocks and the moss and the sheep, and there was a kid hitchhiking, had a Kurt Cobain shirt on, and he figured, music was going to be the one thing to get me out of that place. And yeah,
Yeah.
rest is history. Making the Foo Fighters album. But yeah,
Good old Seattle.
one last thing from Ben. Being part of a community pushes you forward creatively.
All right, that's Seattle. What a great, like, the whole grunge scene came from there, you know?
Yeah.
And what an influential scene that was in the early 90s. You know,
Oh yeah.
it's cool to see, like, it didn't start in the early 90s, but like that's when it left, Seattle and became mainstream. It had been going on in Seattle for a while, and
Oh
you
yeah.
know, um
It took off. Oh, and random side note, this past week there was a concert at the park, summer concert in Tustin. It was a 90s band, and they played, yeah, a bunch of the 90s grunge. They played like a couple Nirvana and Soundgarden and
that's awesome.
all sorts of different stuff, and I loved it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. 8 songs on the album. I figured they originally said they recorded 12 or 13. I think I'm
Oh.
remembering 13, but
Hmm.
probably after 3 or 4 documentaries, they're like, no, we can't do 13 of these, man. No, I'm
Yeah,
just kidding.
yeah.
I don't know. You know what happens with albums is they record a bunch of songs and they're like, we're only going to use these ones. But they kept it to 8, and they, of course, it does make sense to end in New York, especially for a guy like Dave Grohl, who, he said, self-admittedly is still a punk rocker at heart. Go to the birthplace of punk rock in New York City, or at least the self-proclaimed birthplace of punk rock.
Yeah.
Which is, it's fascinating to me when they went here. Um, they didn't pick some like massively popular studio. They picked one of these secret spots, and I think that was kind of like a shout out to New York, because I remember they were talking about Dave Bowie and how Dave Bowie,
Oh yeah.
they would see, a lot of people saw Dave Bowie walking around on the street. They didn't know what he was up to, but he was secretly recording a whole new album, like, and no one knew about it. And it's Dave Bowie's massively popular, especially back in the day. To be able to secretly do something in LA, or no, sorry, not LA, New York is pretty crazy. So they went to a studio called the Magic Shop, just in Soho in Lower Manhattan. Um, oh, who was it that was talking about? Oh, I can see his face. I can't think of his name.
I want to say I don't know what you're thinking of, but was it Chris Martin of Coldplay?
Yes, thank you, thank you. Like, I walked by
Okay.
that door for 2 months straight. I still can't tell you where that door is.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's a gray door on the side of a building, tiny little sign under a doorbell that says the Magic Shop. No advertising for it.
yeah.
But of course, I mean, you look at a place like that. It's well known, but it's one of the hidden gems of the music industry, I think.
Yeah. I let's see. They wanted to have a great like drum room. I remember them mentioning
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's where like the snare sounds really great there, and of course Dave, being the drummer, it's like that would be perfect for him.
Yeah, and he even said it. He's like, "Oh my gosh, the drums sound great in here."
Yeah. I man, there's so I feel like this, well, of course a place like New York, just the sheer volume of people there, but as they were like talking about all the different musicians and artists, I was just like, oh man, them, so many. Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth, Miles Davis, the Ramones, Paul Simon, Billy Joel, Notorious B.I.G., Tribe
Yes.
Called Quest, Cyndi Lauper, LL Cool J, Aretha Franklin, yeah, David Bowie, recording there, Nora Jones, Rolling Stones, Public Enemy, Mike D of the Beastie Boys, Run DMC. I mean, I lost track of like who was from there or who had just recorded there, but yeah, so many big
Coldplay,
names tied to
Coldplay
this
was there.
area.
Arcade Fire.
Yeah.
So I mean, so many. Like it's so
Oh
funny because
yeah.
he's like, we wanted to find a place off the. He's like, yeah, you found a low key place, but it's not unknown. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
really famous people been in the studio.
Yeah. One I forgot to mention, Suzanne Vega. Do 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 do
Yes,
do.
yes. By
Classic.
the diner in the corner. So good.
Yeah.
Did we have a meme about that in high school?
Oh
About that
man.
song? Or it was on
Oh,
there was like some guy singing on the radio or something like that.
I don't know. I do remember we would like sing it in parts.
Yeah.
Uh, Especially I still can picture my chemistry class, like one of us would start singing and like
You were such a troll,
me
dude.
and then soon like other people would start joining in and good times.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. But yeah, music scene huge in New York. They're saying like this is where the hip hop scene started. Def Jam Records, Run DMC. Um, I love Dave's story, like his mom saving money, and when Dave was 11 or 12, they went to New York. Saw all the big sights. Remembers eating 7 hot dogs and getting
7 hot dogs a night,
sick.
yeah.
But it's got to be a fun experience going to New York.
It is. It is. I had the opportunity to go there when I was younger. When we did the whole everything that he said. We went and saw Statue of Liberty, World Trade Center, or the Twin Towers. Um, all the fun stuff in New York, and it's a pretty incredible city. I've been there several times. It is dirty and nasty and crime filled, but as a historian myself, like you got to appreciate the history there.
Oh, for
Like
sure.
and New York has had some ups and downs, and in its heyday, there wouldn't be a lot of the stuff that we have music wise today if it wasn't for New York. You got guys going up and from the South, especially a lot of these guys from New Orleans go up to New York to make it. People go to New York to make it all the time. It's like, if you want to make it in they say if you want to make it in acting, you go to Hollywood, right? But if you want to make it in music or comedy, you go to New York.
Yeah.
I've just heard that. I don't know that for a fact, of course, but that's kind of one of the general sentiments of what New York is. Incredibly iconic places like CBGB's. Uh,
Mm,
where you probably can't count on two hands the amount of punk bands that got their start at CBGB's or
yeah.
had something to do tie back to call CBGB's out as the place where they were inspired to do punk rock music.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, my big takeaway watching the New York one was just like the sheer amount of like famous artists that have their ties to New York.
Yeah, it's
Um,
crazy.
Interesting to hear.
And a lot of the artists you mentioned were specifically tied in some way to the Magic Shop. and I think that's why they brought those guys up.
Yeah.
But if you just would type in musicians from New York, in fact, I'm gonna do that right now. Let me just look musicians, because I mean it's so iconic. You have to think that's why they saved this one for last. Um, Dave Grohl himself even calls it the greatest city in the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, in the beginning, he was just mentioning, well, at the beginning of this episode, there's only one place left to go, the greatest city in the country.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of names on this list, man. A lot of names.
Nice.
Most notably Tupac right here.
Hmm. Name one of your favorites that you're looking at.
Um, I don't know. There's just Art Garfunkel. Art Garfunkel's right here. Paul Simon, Steely Dan, Joey Ramone. The Ramones, by the
Yeah.
way. Do we mention the Ramones? This is the city
Yes.
that they were
Yeah.
talking about. They said we mentioned earlier. They said the Ramones were our Beatles.
Nice. I
So
feel
yeah,
like they said that in almost all of their episodes. This band is
some
our
s
Beatles. This
yeah,
band is our
someone
Beatles.
someone was their Beatles. Just
Yeah.
and when I think I what I think they mean by that is someone who came in and changed it and
Oh, for sure.
revolutionized
Yeah.
music. I think that's what they mean, and because the Beatles very much revolutionized the way we hear, the way we interact with music and musicians. But you think of the Ramones, and they very much do fit the bill of that, especially New York, revolutionizing the way people hear and interact with music.
Yeah.
The song's good too.
Yeah.
I just realized we haven't even said anything about the song. I actually really like this song. It is 7 minutes and 8 seconds long. It is
It
a
is a
really
long
long
one.
song, but
Yeah.
it's really good. It's real, kind of like to end an album like this. It fills you with hope and I don't know. It's just one of those songs where it's like it's at the end and we're here and we're gonna keep going and it's a good song. Slower. It's definitely one of their slower songs.
Yeah. There's some good songs on here. I will admit, overall, this album isn't, as a whole, it isn't towards the top of my favorite Foo Fighters albums. And I think it's interesting because when you like talk with Foo Fighters fans, like of course, like we all love it. It's like great songs, but like compared to some of their other ones, it just doesn't, maybe not right at the top. And I'm wondering, like, when you listen to an album, you're kind of like connecting with it. Whereas this album, there's like so many songs, like so many places that you are trying to connect that maybe you don't connect with all of them. I don't know exactly, but um it's so awesome how they do go to all these places. Probably one of the most creative albums I've seen made, but the songs itself, great album, but just maybe not the greatest album. So, but you gotta at least give it a listen though. Some really good songs. Some probably even get a crack my top 10.
Yeah, it's not the most critically successful one album either, but you gotta think that does have to do a lot with what he was trying to do, and I think this one's more about art than anything else, and just kind of diving
Yeah,
into and try to shout out to all the cities that revolutionized music in the United States, and and
yeah,
and, and you know. So yeah, while it wasn't as critically acclaimed, you can play a bunch of Foo Fighter songs for people, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I know the song." But you could play, I mean, you could play whole albums, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I recognize most of these songs." And then this album, you're like, "Yeah, I might recognize one of them."
yeah,
So it's definitely one of the less played, less recognizable from like casual, more casual Foo Fighters listeners.
yeah.
But
I
yeah,
will say learning about the history, learning about the cities has given me a greater appreciation for it. Like if you do
yeah.
just listen to the album start to finish, it's good, not the greatest like I mentioned, but when you really understand where it's coming from, it's
I think understanding the
so
lyrics,
awesome.
like you said, yeah.
Yeah.
So. Well,
But
that's it.
yeah,
That
this
is the
has,
8th studio album from the Foo Fighters, Sonic Highways.
I think this has been probably one of our longest ones, but the fact that we were trying to condense so much information,
8 hours of documentary.
yeah, but yeah, I also, it's a good time to transition. We've got some guest podcasters, my boys. Told
I do
Andrew
have to
about,
say though, I don't have a special guest this time, but I was listening to what song? The Feast and the Famine, which
mm,
is in my opinion is one of the better songs on this album.
yeah.
My daughter walks in, she's like, "I like this song," and I was like, "Oh yeah, why do you like it?" She's like, "I don't know, it's just fun."
Nice. We should probably mention some of the songs. They've got the language logo you might see, so careful. We
Which
like to
is
keep
a little
we
uncharacteristic to drop f bombs for Dave Grohl. Not in interviews, he
oh
says them
yeah.
all the time, but in his songs, he usually doesn't have them.
Yeah, his songs are fairly clean for the mouth that he has just
Yeah,
in
right.
general. But anyway, I told Andrew about like the making of this album, and I'll let you guys listen in on that and see what he has to say. So this podcast is about the album Sonic Highways. So which, as we discussed earlier,
The 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 main number is 8.
yeah, they go around to 8 different cities, record at 8 different studios. Something that, typically isn't done with
Yeah.
other bands. What do you think of it?
Um it's kind of like specific
Yeah.
and like, oh, we have to do this. And I just think, why? Why?
Well, could be a variety of reasons, but pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun to see.
Or maybe something's just wrong with Dave Grohl.
There you go.
I take that back.
I take that back. Pretty cool to see him play with Ben Gibbard. You're familiar with him.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
You also saw him in concert.
I did.
You see too many people in concert.
I see a lot.
Yeah.
If you got to choose a band to play with, just like they did for this album, who would you choose?
Like, could I just sit aside them? Because I don't really want to play with them. I just want to sit.
Yeah.
Backstage pass. Get a free backstage pass for any band.
Which
Or
band? Foo Fighters.
If anyone's gonna get angry at me because I don't say Foo Fighters,
No.
get angry now.
Get angry.
Because I'm gonna choose the Aquabats.
Nice.
Nice.
That's fun. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Bye.
There's Andrew's
Great.
review.
Great choice, Andrew.
Yeah.
Great choice.
I'll let him know. And Caleb was in the room. He heard Andrew, so Caleb was eager to record as well. So we thought
Awesome.
we just name off some of the cities. He kind of added his own commentary to the cities. So here we go. Oscar. 8 different cities.
Later.
The elevator. Do you want to hear the different cities? Repeat after me. Chicago.
Repeat it out.
DC.
DC.
Nashville.
And then good Nashville.
Austin.
Nasty.
LA.
LA.
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Seattle.
Seattle.
And New York.
And
Awesome. Thanks, Caleb.
thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. He was pretty excited. I was like, Caleb, you want to record one too? He's like, yes. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
So wholesome. I love it. All right. Well, there we have it. Guest speakers in the bag. 8th studio
Podcast
album in the bag. What's our next album?
Next, we've got Concrete and Gold, the 9th studio album.
Indeed. All right. We'll be back in a couple weeks with our next podcast. Thanks, guys, for listening. Yes, it was a longer one, but
Oh man, yeah.
try to just keep these conversations going. So thanks
I
for
don't-
listening, and we'll see you in the next one, Kurt.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Done.